Welcome to another episode of Tanstwocents podcast. And today's episode is titled The Pendulum Swing in GovCon. As we settle into some of the new changes with the administration brought by the President Trump and his executive orders, federal contractors are already feeling the ripple effects of multiple executive orders and changes within this administration. These policy shifts touch everything from workforce priorities to technology investments and climate initiatives and supply chain requirements. And today we're going to explore how these shifting forces, whether driven by policy, technology, or global events, will shape the federal contracting space and how businesses can position themselves to succeed in this dynamic environment. I'm your host, Tanwilson, and today with us I have Shauna Weatherly from FedSubK. Shauna, thanks for joining us here today, and please say hello to our intellectuals and share a little bit about yourself and your incredible work at FedSubK.
Well, thanks for having me, Ton. It's really great to be here. I'm the founder and president of Federal Subcontract Solutions, and that's FedSubK for short. And what makes FedSubK unique, I think, in kind of this GovCon space is that I bring a lot of firsthand experiences from my federal contracting background from multiple perspectives because I've held quite a few roles both in and out of government in about over 4 decades associated in and around this space. I started as a young military spouse and I was moving around the world, and that's kind of how I got my first federal job. It was the only gig in town in the country I was living in. And it was never anything I thought I'd do, but I jumped into it. And from that first position, which was in human resources, I was able to kind of cultivate a career that spans areas of human resource, budget, manpower, acquisition, did some program and project management, and then ended in policy, and was able to do that across several DoD and civilian agencies for about a 36-year career. And I see projects in the federal marketplace from a lot of angles. I've been the contracting officer, I've been a chief of contracting, I've been the contracting officer's representative, managing government contracts, in those prior roles, writing contracts and signing contracts with unlimited authorities. And then as a FAR policy expert in my last position, I was an advisor to the Civilian Agency Acquisition Council, developing FAR cases and reviewing DFAR cases for implementation into SAM.gov and that integrated award environment where, all our data for contracts goes, and have been part of that rulemaking process that we hear about a lot. And now I'm a small business owner and an SBA certified women-owned small business. So I've kind of faced the gauntlet of that registration and certification process and understand some of these, unique challenges now of small businesses trying to find opportunities and understanding the rules of the game. And then, I'm a speaker and an instructor and an author. I've taught some classes both inside government and out, and I've write a few white papers on women-owned small business issues as an advocate, as a small business advocate. And actually was interviewed by the House subcommittee on small businesses a couple of years ago on one of those white papers.
Wow.
So I got some opportunity to actually feel like I was making some contributions. We did see one thing out of our recommendations change, which is the renewal of the women-owned small business certification from 1 to 3 years. That was a recommendation we made in our white paper. So I was really happy to see that come into play a couple of years later. So that's kind of my mission, to be kind of a trusted resource and an advocate for small businesses, because I've seen that struggle inside and outside of government. And I want to provide those resources on an affordable basis and be that trusted resource for small businesses out here.
Yeah, I've actually really looked forward to our conversation because you and I see you online all the time on LinkedIn. We contribute to a lot of the similar posts and discussions out there. We don't always agree, which is the best part about this industry because we all bring so many different perspectives on things. And I love your life journey, your professional journey, and the fact that you have kind of seen government contracting from both sides of the table, which brings a very unique perspective that I think our intellectuals here are going to really kind of enjoy hearing. Just because, hearing from one side it is really not a balanced approach. And I love to give everybody the opportunity to kind of express dissenting or difference of opinions on different topics, just because that's kind of how we learn and grow and make this industry better. So Really looking forward
Yeah,
to this conversation here today. So,
sounds great.
speaking of GovCon, though, there it's the one thing that I think we can always agree on is that it's constantly changing and dealing with swings and shifts, especially with the new administration. Some of this is pretty typical, some of it is unprecedented at some points, but let's kind of have a little bit of fun about this. And if you were to pick a movie or a TV show to describe this ever changing, like FedCon world, what would it be? And how would you describe it to someone who's maybe not familiar with GovCon?
Well, that's an interesting question. I had to think about that. But I was thinking about the show Chopped, right? I'm a Food Network foodie
Yeah.
watcher, right? I'm not a cook, but I watch the shows, and so I went with Chopped from the Food Network because I think it's kind of interesting. You're using the same basket, different ingredients that are a surprise to you to make some inspired dish for a set of judges over a very short window of time, and you're trying to win a cash prize, right? So I kind of see that as kind of the procurement landscape in a
Hmm.
nutshell. The ingredients are kind of like the different procurement rules and the different agencies and every different RFP that you may respond to. That inspired dish is like this proposal, right? You've got to present this great proposal in a short window of time, which is your offer period, right? And if you're not an experienced chef or not an experienced contractor in the
Yeah.
GovCon space, you can have a tough time creating something and being flexible doing it across multiple opportunities. And it does take some planning, it does take some resourcefulness, on that part and some experience. And then the judging is kind of like the review of that, right? The government gets a chance to review your bid or your proposal, and they're taking a look at it. And then the grand prize is the contract. It comes
Hmm.
down to whose bid or proposal gives the best value to the government, and that can be subjective at times. It's not always a low price, right? And so that's kind of the tastes of the judges and things like that.
Yeah.
Depending on the processes that get used. So that was kind of my analogy in the nutshell of a TV show.
Yeah. No, that sounds great. I am a huge foodie. I'm a foodie and a cook. And so I can definitely appreciate that. And I love like the Gordon Ramsay shows where he does all of those battles in the kitchens. And, like I think he's got this one show where there's like different levels of kitchens. And
Yeah,
so like the top that show is really kind of cool because the top level you've got like all the best equipment and you've got all these resources, you get all the stuff first. And I kind of think of that as being like the large business, right? They have like this huge advantage. And then you've got the mid tiers, and then you've got like the people in the basement, which are just scraps. They're just trying to make do and be innovative. And I think, one of the things that we learn from that show and Chopped and others is that like innovation and creativity can come at different levels, and seeing that and being able to kind of witness those examples and how other people think outside the box is kind of inspiring, even for those of us who are maybe more experienced or we think that we've seen everything, right?
yeah,
We really kind of haven't, because we all kind of bring our own different perspectives and baggage and knowledge to the table. So
yeah.
I love that. I love that analogy. Um, and so let's just like dive into our discussion here. And what I always like to do in our first segment is just kind of like level set the expectations and get everyone on the same page. And so I think it's really important for us, when we're talking about the pendulum swing and GovCon, to understand the forces at play, right? So it's like, let's just say like watching the game, like The Price is Right, for example. Like this wheel is constantly spinning. Some spins, like administrative changes, will shift priorities kind of subtly. Others, like regulatory requirements or executive orders, can kind of all of a sudden feel like this sudden like buzzer, like, oh, time's up, like it or not, this is kind of, what you've rolled. So, Shauna, from your perspective, what are the biggest pendulum swings in the federal space today, and how do they shape kind of the way contractors need to kind of prepare?
Well, yeah, right now there's a few. Policy, specifically procurement policy, I think is one pendulum that is always swinging. And particularly now, that's the set of rules that we're playing under any given moment in the process as contractors, right? Either whether you're seeking awards or you have an award, you're playing by this set of rules, and it includes small business rules and competition rules, rule of two, types of contracts, all those things. I think another big one is security. While security's always been important to the government, and it used to only be physical security back in the day, we're dealing with cybersecurity now and attacks from bad actors, and we don't always know where they originate. So that's a huge pendulum that is swinging in the government now. Compliance is another one. Out of procurement policy comes compliance, and knowing what you need to do to be compliant with federal laws and regulations. And as those things change, that's terms and conditions, reporting, and oversight. They vary by agency, and they vary by when your contract was awarded, whether it was 5 years ago under those rules then or current rules now. So being kind of aware of those pendulums and how they impact you, whether, where you're at in that process. And then I think this is the one everybody's talking about quite a bit. It's been on a lot of people's minds, is the innovative use of artificial intelligence. We're seeing that both in industry and in government starting to take hold, particularly when it comes to federal contracting and processes around writing proposals, evaluating, and crafting award documents on the government side, and then proposals on the industry side as well. So you have to be tuned in to kind of all those things, what's going on all at the same time, because the changes occur at different times and by different means, and to have different catalysts to all of them. And knowing how and where that change comes from is important to really be successful in the federal marketplace. You have to take your business's temperature in all these areas and know where you stand in terms of really your business strengths and weaknesses, gaps in your knowledge, your connections and relationships to the space, and kind of the sources you rely on, whether they're current or outdated, and, the advisors you even use and the knowledge of those people. So having a business structure that has you and allows you to take your temperature at different points or a different cadence in your business operations is really important to kind of keeping on top of these pendulums that are swinging all the time, more than just those four that I mentioned.
Yeah, and I think it's so critical too, and I hate to use this term because it's so overused, is to be agile in our approach. I think we need to have some flexibility in how we pursue or how we approach some of these topics that you mentioned. And I think, one of the things, obviously, with CMMC, and cybersecurity and just security of the infrastructure, securing our borders. Like you said, it used to be physical security. Now it's so much more than just the physical security. Is that it's not always like the attacks are not always obvious. It's so nuanced now. It's like so many things like
Huh?
deep sick and TikTok and different things like that. They may seem innocuous, super, like at face value. But would you really dive deep into who owns it? Where's the data coming from? Where's your data going? It comes back to like this proverbial, like constant challenge that we have is data. Who owns it? Where does it go? Where is it coming? How is it, like kind of being used? And so that is kind of a concern. And I think the AI part is kind of interesting with the administration and Stargate and wanting to be, like this AI is like the new frontier, right? JFK had like, we're going into space and we're going to land on the moon. With this administration, we want to be the AI, leader in the world, which is almost kind of in conflict with the GovCon industry and how it's kind of taken its stance on allowances for AI tools in the development of proposals. For example, NASA SOUP. Again, I hate to always seem to be picking on NASA, but they put it out there. So again, it was not, I didn't write it into like their requirements. Down to, are you using AI to evaluate proposals, which is not a new concept. So it's like, if you're going to use it to evaluate, why are you not allowing industry to kind of use it as a benefit for their creation, because it could be a force multiplier and a really huge advantage for small businesses that are resource strapped.
Right. Exactly. I agree 100%. We've got to get on the same page on this. And I think it comes down to understanding too what's behind it. Again, there's a lot of fear still wrapped around AI. And I think, we're all learning to adapt to that and the idea of what is good AI and not. So, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So like I tell my 15-year-old, I used to tell him use Google for good. Now I tell him to use AI for good. And so it's
Good.
it's an ever evolving field.